Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I'm the grief counselor here at the Living Legacy Foundation.
Hi, and my name is Lindsey Romeo, a social worker and family services coordinator at the Living Legacy Foundation. For those of you who don't know, the Living Legacy is the organ procurement organization from Maryland, with the exception of PG, Montgomery, and Charles County. Like many OPOs across the US, we have felt the direct impact of the increase in overdose deaths, along with our hospital partners and first responders. If we look back to 2013, 1 in 10 people who became organ donors died as the result of an overdose. Last year, it was 1 in 3, and this year, so far, it's been about 1 in 4 people. While our mission is to help and save, enhance lives through organ and eye and tissue donation while honoring the legacy of our donors, we feel a responsibility to help raise awareness that overdose is preventable and decrease the stigma associated with substance use disorder to help encourage and support individuals in getting treatment.
Yeah, absolutely, Lindsey. And, many of us here at the Living Legacy Foundation have also felt the impact of substance use and overdose loss personally. We know and recognize that drug overdoses have spiked since the pandemic, and it's up over 18% at this point. And with that, we know that the impact of these overdose deaths have a ripple effect that spans far and wide. So we really want to just take a moment and recognize the grief and pain someone feels when they lose someone to an overdose. In general, it's common for grievers to experience a wide range of emotions, such as sadness, anger, guilt, anxiety, just to name a few. Grievers also experience many physical reactions, such as fatigue, difficulty sleeping, a change in appetite, a feeling maybe a tightness in their chest, or even a shortness of breath. And so, in addition to all of that, we also can experience cognitive reactions that can include difficulty concentrating, being forgetful, or even finding yourself more confused than you normally would be. And so how you experience grief is unique to you and your relationship with the person you lost. All of the physical, cognitive, emotional, spiritual impacts that you're experiencing as a result of this loss can certainly impact our behaviors and how we cope. But first, we wanted to talk a little bit about what makes overdose loss so unique.
Yeah. So grieving a death due to an overdose can add another level of complexity. Death to overdose is often perceived and felt as a sudden, tragic loss. However, when someone struggles with substance use disorder over the period of many years, families and friends may experience some anticipatory grief. What that means is that family and friends may notice their loved one changing in appearance, changes in behavior, and shifting priorities in relationships and employment. Some families may express, "We lost them many years ago." Though there can be that anticipatory grief, the loss can still feel sudden and as a shock. Sometimes we'll see individuals die from overdose after months or even years of being clean. The death can feel unnatural and preventable, which can bring about many difficult emotions. You may find yourself experiencing many strong and sometimes uncomfortable emotions, such as guilt, relief, resentment, anger, blame, and shame. And we sometimes call these the G.R.A.B.S emotions. So the first of the G.R.A.B.S emotions is guilt. You may feel guilt that you were not able to protect the person who died or prevent the death from happening. Guilt may be magnified if you were the confidant of the person who died, and now question if you feel like you should have shared the situation with others.
And the R can stand for either relief or resentment. So you may experience feelings of relief if you believe that this person is no longer struggling, or that you no longer have to worry about being responsible for them or their actions. A loss from an overdose death can also create feelings of resentment if your grief is not met with the same compassion that you would expect someone would receive if, from other manners of death. You may also experience feelings of resentment if your expectations of justice are not met, or if false or judgmental information is being publicly shared. It's also not uncommon that people resent the actions or circumstances that led to the person's death, or even towards yourself if you are feeling any relief.
So next would be anger. So you may feel anger towards the person who died, other individuals involved in the circumstances, or at yourself for not being able to help or stop the person from using substances. Anger may also be felt towards others, including helping and medical professionals, or a higher power because they were not able to prevent the death.
And the B in G.R.A.B.S stands for blame. So when someone dies as a result of an overdose, feelings of blame can present in sometimes complex ways, which may evolve over time. It may be blame that you feel towards yourself, the person who died, or even society for failing to keep them safe. This sense of blame can be especially painful if it's directed at you or your loved one by other sources, such as family, friends, or even society.
And then lastly, it would be shame. So when blame is directed towards you or the person who died, it can lead to feelings of shame. While our society is continuing to understand more about substance use disorder, we recognize that there is unfortunately still a stigma attached to it, and it may be looked at as a choice or preventable. Feelings of shame may be especially difficult to discuss with others, making this a heavy burden to bear. And holding on to these feelings privately will give shame power. Therefore, it's just so important to be compassionate and gentle with yourself.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And I also wanted to just take a moment to differentiate between feelings of guilt and shame. So guilt is more about the belief that something you did hurt another person. It has to do with actions. It's extremely common in grief, feeling bad about maybe something that you did or didn't do, or you did say or weren't able to say. And this guilt can be, something that truly we should feel guilty for, or sometimes just this perceived feeling that we should feel guilty for something. Shame actually involves, feeling that you yourself are a bad person. So it's really directed inwards. So guilt, again, is my actions were bad, whereas shame is a feeling of I am bad.
Thank you so much for that distinction, Sarah. So that sums up the G.R.A.B.S emotions. It's important to remember that everyone experiences grief in their own unique way. Perhaps some of the experiences we discussed have resonated with you, or perhaps not, and that's okay. There's so much more to grief than our feelings and emotions. It really is a full body experience impacting our ability to concentrate, to remember, sleep, and eating, just to name a few. Sarah, I was wondering if you could end just with a few thoughts on what people can do to care for themselves after they have lost someone to an overdose.
Yeah, absolutely, Lindsey. It's so important to remember that grief is not a one-size-fits-all experience, but I'll go ahead and touch on just a couple helpful reminders that I think would be beneficial for anyone. For anyone, especially those really fresh in their grief, it is so important to start with some of the basics, making sure that you're staying hydrated, eating when you're able to. Appetite changes are really normal in grief. However, it's still important to try to get some nutrition because grief can absolutely impact your immune system. Also, keeping in mind that periods of physical activity alternated with relaxation can help alleviate some of those physical manifestations of grief. As Lindsey was saying, grief can impact our memory and concentration as well. So make lists for yourself, give yourself extra time to do certain things or to get certain places, and regard yourself with compassion and patience. If you need help with any tasks, be sure to reach out to someone that you trust. And keep in mind that as time goes on, it can be really helpful to learn more about grief just to help normalize and validate what you're going through. Sadly, it seems we don't really talk about grief until we're experiencing it. And I can tell you from my work with people that so many people come in asking, is this experience normal? Because grief can feel anything but. It's important to remember that the people experiencing grief are the experts on what their grief is like for them. And so there may be a lot of well intended suggestions from other folks, but just keep in mind only you're able to determine when you're ready or not ready to do certain things. I think it's also important to keep in mind that processing feelings and learning more about the different coping skills that are out there can be really helpful. So, feel empowered to reach out to a grief counselor, uh, reach out, join a support group, or talk to another trusted person in your life. Remember that the way someone dies did not define who they are in their life. Substance use disorder is complicated, so it can be really helpful for people to learn a little bit more about it. Additionally, if there's specific advocacy organizations that are out there, and I know that there are lots, it could be a good idea to get in touch with them, as well as support groups specifically for people who've lost a loved one to overdose. We do have some resources that we've compiled, so please take a look at them if they'd be beneficial for you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you all for watching. Please remember, you do not have to be alone in your grief. And if there's any way that we can help those out there that are in need of grief resources and support, please reach out to us. You can email us at griefsupport@thellf.org, or you can call us at 410-242-7000, extension 1147.